Bow. What up, y'all? I want to welcome y'all back to another episode of the Trifecta Podcast. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification button on, man. We coming to you guys throughout the whole playoffs. It's getting spicy, man. It's getting real spicy, man. Series is going down to the wire. Teams is looking to advance to the NBA Finals, all right? So we're getting closer and closer to that realization, all right? So hit that like and subscribe button. Hit those comments, man. Give me some feedback. And follow your boy at the Trifecta Podcast. So getting into Dallas versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the season series was 3-1 in favor of the Minnesota Timberwolves. They had a 120 offensive rating and a 106 defensive rating. The rebounding battle was 179 to 148, and Minnesota had a 29.8 offensive rebounding percentage, which is the second best versus any team this season. So I do expect that to be shortened, the gap in the rebounding percentage, all right? Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington did not participate in the season series. All the games were before the trade deadline. Actually, Kyrie Irving only played in one game, and Luka played in two games. The one game that Kyrie Irving and Luka played in, they actually won that basketball game. So it's not too much to take in here with the season series statistics, but I do see a few trends that I think will hold true in the playoff series. So Minnesota shot over 50% from the field in 3 of the 4 games. They mostly outshot them from the three-point line. So three-pointers made 57 to 42 in favor of the Minnesota Timberwolves. So Minnesota made 14 threes made per game to Dallas's 10.5. And Minnesota shot it at a 42.2% clip, which is over the best percentage in the NBA, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they were shooting the shit out of the basketball. Dallas, on the other hand, couldn't throw a rock in the ocean. They were ice cold. They shot 31.3% from 3, which is the second worst versus any team this season. So I actually think that's very indicative of game 1. So in game 1, Minnesota shot 49 threes, which was ridiculous. I don't think they ever shot as many threes as that in the playoffs, in the regular season, to be honest with you. They didn't shoot a lot of threes in the regular season. They were a very high percentage three-point shooting team because they didn't take as many as, for example, the Boston Celtics. So they definitely got out of character with that. But I think that's more so Dallas' scheme in their strategy. So Dallas kind of did a boxing the elbows type of defense. All right, so they made guys shoot. They packed the paint. They shrunk the floor. So if you guys play 2K, you can have that shrink the floor adjustment that you can do, which makes it harder for guys to get into the paint. That's essentially what the Dallas Mavericks did. They made guys shoot threes. They made Ant kick out. They did not want Ant get into the basket. Ant did not get to the basket at all, man. So he had 8 shots in the restricted area, all right, in these 2 basketball games. 8 shots. And is routinely one of the best rim paint attackers in the NBA. All right, so Dallas' scheme is doing a great job of forcing Ant to shoot a lot of threes, forcing the Minnesota Timberwolves to shoot a lot of threes, all right? Obviously, they can beat you that way, but that's not their strong suit. That's not their bread and butter. Their bread and butter is getting into the paint, offensive rebounds, and playing great defense. Dallas, on the other hand, shot 6 for 25 from 3, 24%. So, as I mentioned before, indicative of the season series. However, Dallas was able to leverage that into making Minnesota not play their brand of basketball. Dallas was still getting a lot of points in the paint. So Dallas has 62 points in the paint to Minnesota's 38. Minnesota was, I think, a top 12 team in points in the paint all regular season. Dallas was bottom 20. Or I think they made them in 22 in the league in points in the paint. So it's clear Dallas has a scheme and they're making Minnesota play into it. Minnesota's job is to not play into that scheme and still get good shots and still get paint touches, still get rim attacks, all that good stuff. You don't want to settle for threes. Karl-Anthony Towns is taking way too many threes. 9 threes is way too much. You have a size advantage over the Dallas Mavericks, all right? If PJ Washington is guarding, PJ Washington is what, 6'6" to 6'8"? Cat is like 6'10", all right, and strong at that. He just guarded Jokic as well as anybody could guard Jokic in the previous series. He must use his body. He must get to the basket, start getting more post-ups, start getting more closeouts on drive, start getting all that good stuff, man. He can't keep settling for those 3-pointers. Same thing with Ant as well. He has to find a way to get downhill. All right, Gobert's going to have to set screens. I would actually set screens with Karl-Anthony Towns. As I mentioned in the previous series, he's just a better rollman. So if Dallas blitz that pick and roll, Karl-Anthony Towns in a short roll, that's a lot better than Rudy Gobert. All right, so I would definitely do that 2-man pick and roll with Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns. So in the season series, Ant is averaging 24.5 points per game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, averaging 10.3 points in the paint per game. So he has to start getting back to that in this postseason. Cat, 21 points per game, 10 rebounds, 6 3-point attempts per game. So I want to highlight the 3-point attempts because 6 3-point attempts per game is the 6th most versus any team this season having played 2 or more games for Karl-Anthony Towns. So it's clear he's getting very trigger happy from 3 against his defense in particular. I don't understand why. I understand they're packing the paint, but in a regular season, I don't know if they have that same strategy. I don't have the film, but you have to find a way to get to the basket and use your size, use your advantages. Don't play them to your disadvantages. All right, we know you can shoot the basketball, but that should be your last resort. If you're open, late shot clock, go for it. But if you're not, you're just chucking 9 threes. It's unacceptable, man. You can't do that. So Karl-Anthony Towns is 21 for 33 on 2-pointers versus the Dallas Mavericks. That's 63% from the field versus the Dallas Mavericks. He has to start getting to the basket, right? It's clear your advantage is getting to the basket, right? You're not making a lot of threes, all right? You're only making 1.8 threes per game versus the Mavs. So you're 63% from 2 against the Mavs. So we obviously see what's the greater advantage is. So you have to start using that. So Naz Reid has been playing really well versus the Mavs. 16 points per game, 7 rebounds, 56% from 3. So I expect him to have a really big series, man, especially if Cat is going to settle for too many threes and not use his advantages. Naz Reid can step into that role and essentially do the same thing, to be totally honest with you. You got 2 bigs that can essentially do the same thing, attack mismatches, shoot the 3 ball. All right, so I expect Naz Reid to have a big series. On Dallas' side, they had a 106 offensive rating and a 120 defensive rating. As I mentioned earlier, not much to take from there. They only played in 2 of the games. In Luka's case, at least, Kyrie only played in 1 of those games, so you can't really take too much from that. So in that game that Luka and Kyrie played in, Luka had 34 points, Kyrie had 35 points. They combined to shoot 26 for 53 from the field, which is 49%. So it's clear they could kind of get what they want on McDaniels and Anthony Edwards. I do think McDaniels is a great defender, but I think Luka's size and his ability to change pace and decelerate and accelerate, hit that step back jumper, he's playing a lot better since the last series, man. Versus the Clippers, like from the first round till now, he looked a lot like the Luka that we've seen in the regular season, MVP Luka. So I expect him to have a big series. Kai just a tough cover for anybody, man. Ant called him out. He wanted the challenge. It didn't look good in game 1, but we will see how that will play out in the rest of the series. But Kai's going to get his. As long as he shoots the ball and be aggressive, he's going to shoot anywhere from 45 to 50% from the field as a 6'2 guard. All right, so Kai is he's on a whole nother level, man. He needs to get his respect. So in that one game, Kyrie combined for 7-11 versus Edwards and McDaniels when guarded by them. Luka was 6 for 14 versus McDaniels. So McDaniels has a better time guarding Luka, but as I mentioned before, Luka has looked a lot better, and McDaniels will get his stops. He will force Luka to turn the ball over a few times, I'm sure of it. But Luka's just overall skills, offensive talent, his size is just going to reign to be too much versus McDaniels, in my opinion. So PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, the 2 big trade deadline additions. So rebounding is a big thing that they added with those 2 guys. So PJ Washington is averaging 6.2 rebounds per game. Gafford is averaging 7 rebounds per game. So as I mentioned before, the rebounding difference was substantial in the regular season. But 6.2 and 7, that's 13 rebounds per game. All right, so if you add 13 rebounds to that margin, it's definitely going to close the gap a little bit more. So they're a big help just in that category alone, let alone defense. But let's get into some shooting. So PJ Washington in particular. PJ is averaging 1.17 points per possession in spot-ups. That's 77th percentile in the NBA. So he's been lighting it up. He gets a lot of open threes, but he's been knocking them down to his credit. So you can't really fault him for that. Gafford's energy, his athleticism, his activity, it's just been great for the Dallas Mavericks, man. I do think Lively has been a little bit better. In all the metrics, it kind of tells you that Lively has been better. The plus-minus is better. His percentage of finishing at the rim is better. I mentioned last series he was shooting 83% at the rim versus the Thunder. So he's just been better. But if you have 2 of those guys, 2 guys that give you energy, athleticism, shot blocking ability, it just definitely just helps you out in the long run. Now you got 2 guys to throw in. Like you could just rotate those 2 guys. So in that first game, Dallas really shrunk the floor. They played the boxes and the elbow. So they were essentially forcing Minnesota to take those contested threes, all right? They weren't running guys off the line, but they were giving late contests, all right? Minnesota does not have any really knockdown shooters. Cat is a knockdown shooter for a big man. Conley is a knockdown shooter, but he doesn't shoot a lot of threes in general. So if you got McDaniel shooting 8 threes, Alexander Walker shooting 8 threes, Naz Reid even, he's a good shooter, but he's shooting 8 threes. You kind of want that, all right? Because they're just going to play into that, and Dallas is going to get a lot more points in the paint, which they dominated in that first game. So Luka and Kyrie is going to be a tough cover just for anybody, but especially in this series as well, because Minnesota does not do a lot of blitzing action. Minnesota just plays straight up, all right? So they're going to play in single coverage with McDaniels and Ant, Gardner Kai, and Luka. They don't want to bring two to the ball, because when you bring two to the ball, it forces your defense to get in rotation. You don't want Rudy Gobert in rotation because he cannot close out on guys in the corner fast enough. And if you do close out, it's going to be a very wild closeout. It's going to allow a driving lane to the basket. So on ISOs, Luka is 1.09 points per possession on ISOs in the regular season. Kyrie's at 1.08 points per possession. Both of those guys are over 80th percentile in the NBA. So we know they're lethal offensive players, lethal in the ISO, lethal in the pick and roll. It's going to be hard for Gobert to stay in front of these guys, all right? Minnesota has to make a decision now. What are you going to do with Gobert? Are you going to blitz? All right, that's what teams been doing in the last series. That's what the Thunder did. And who beat them? P.J. Washington beat them. Dirk Jones beat them. I mean, they have options there. Those guys are making shots. If they weren't making shots, then it would be something easier to be done. But if they're making shots, then it's going to be hard for you to do that. But if you play these guys at ISO, it's going to be clips as well. It's going to be wraps. You can't guard these guys on a pick and roll as well. So if Minnesota wants to hedge and recover and Gobert's in the screen action, Gobert's slow. Luka's quick enough to get around Gobert. You just go around, get around the show. Kyrie's damn sure quick enough to get around the show on Gobert. So now you're still in a disadvantaged situation if you're the Minnesota Timberwolves. You don't want to be in a 4-on-3 with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic with the ball. You don't want that. That's just going to be bad for your basketball team. So I think the ISO possessions and the high pick and roll is going to be a problem for Minnesota. So I do think Dallas has more offensive options. The offense is more settled in already, if that makes sense. So they know what they are. They know what they want to do. They know who their two main guys are. They know they want to ISO, they want to pick and roll. They know if they blitz, they want to head out to guys like P.J. Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. Minnesota, on the other hand, doesn't really have that, all right? They're still kind of trying to figure out what's the best advantage on our offensive end. Is it Ant, even though they're packing the paint on Ant? Is it Cat, trying to attack a mismatch, trying to get him to post up more? Like, what is it? Is it our role guy? If they're going to shoot 23s, 33s, like, who's it going to be that's going to lead us on the offensive end? Especially how they're playing Ant-Man in the Minnesota Timberwolves. So that's my prediction, Dallas in 7. We will see Dallas in the NBA Finals versus the Boston Celtics. So it should be a great NBA Finals, man. I'm so excited. But coming to you guys next time on the Trifecta Podcast.